The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes 1892. Episode 8, The Speckled Band. Welcome back, Detective. After witnessing Holmes's Christmas mercy toward James Ryder, you might think you've seen how compassion can triumph over strict justice. But today's case will plunge you into the darkest depths of human evil, where greed transforms a guardian into a predator, and a family home becomes a chamber of terror. Have you ever wondered what could make a dying woman's final words so cryptic that they provide no clue to her killer's identity? Prepare yourself for one of Holmes's most chilling investigations, where death strikes from the shadows of a locked room, and only the keenest observation can prevent a second murder. Picture yourself on a gray April morning in 1883, when the fog hangs thick over London streets and an atmosphere of dread seems to permeate the very air around Baker Street. You arrive early at 221B to find Holmes already dressed and pacing restlessly, his sharp features etched with concern. "We have a visitor coming this morning," Holmes announces without preamble. "A young woman whose life may depend entirely on our ability to solve one of the most fiendish puzzles I've ever encountered. Her sister died under circumstances so bizarre that the official investigation concluded it was impossible to determine the cause of death." Before you can respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoes up the stairs, accompanied by the rustle of heavy skirts and the unmistakable trembling of someone consumed by terror. The door opens to reveal a woman of about 30, dressed in black mourning clothes, her face pale with exhaustion and her hands shaking uncontrollably. "Mr. Holmes," she gasps, barely able to speak through her fear. "My name is Helen Stoner. I believe someone is trying to murder me, using the same method that killed my twin sister Julia exactly 2 years ago. And I think I may only have days or perhaps hours left to live." Think about this opening, Detective. What kind of threat could be so specific that Miss Stoner can predict her own death with such precision? What pattern has she observed that fills her with such absolute certainty of impending doom? Holmes guides Miss Stoner to a chair by the fire, his manner instantly becoming protective and reassuring. "Please, Miss Stoner, calm yourself and tell us everything. Start from the beginning and omit no detail, however seemingly insignificant. Sometimes the smallest observation can mean the difference between life and death." Through her tears, Helen Stoner begins to unfold a tale that grows more ominous with each revelation. "My sister Julia and I are the only surviving children of Dr. Grimesby Roylott of Stoke Moran. Our mother died when we were very young, leaving us a considerable inheritance, but with one crucial condition. The will specified that we would each receive our portion of the inheritance only upon marriage," Helen continues, her voice growing steadier as she focuses on the facts. "Until then, our stepfather Dr. Roylott receives the income from our mother's estate. But here's the critical point. If either of us were to die unmarried, our share would revert permanently to him." Holmes's eyes narrow with immediate understanding. "So Dr. Roylott has a substantial financial motive to prevent your marriages, and an even greater incentive to ensure your deaths before you can wed. Tell me about your sister's death, Miss Stoner. What exactly happened 2 years ago?" The story Helen relates will chill you to the bone. Julia had become engaged to a young officer just before her death. She had been excited about her wedding, planning every detail with such joy. But in the weeks before she died, she became increasingly frightened about strange sounds coming from Dr. Roylott's room at night. "What kind of sounds?" Watson asks, leaning forward with professional interest. Helen's description creates an atmosphere of supernatural dread. A low whistling sound, followed by what she described as a clanging noise, like metal striking metal. "It happened every night around 3 in the morning, always from the direction of our stepfather's chamber." But here's where the mystery becomes truly sinister. "The night Julia died, she came to my room in absolute terror. She said she couldn't sleep because of the speckled band. Those were her exact words. I had no idea what she meant, but she seemed convinced that something called the speckled band was going to kill her." Holmes interrupts with sharp attention. "The speckled band? Did she explain what this phrase meant? Did you see anything that might have appeared speckled or banded?" Helen shakes her head in frustration. "That's just it, Mr. Holmes. She died before she could explain." The circumstances of Julia's death defy all logical explanation. At 3 in the morning, I was awakened by a terrible scream from Julia's room. I rushed to her door, but it was locked from the inside. Dr. Roylott and I broke down the door together, and we found Julia writhing in agony in the center of her room. Her final words were, "Helen, oh my God, Helen, it was the band, the Speckled Band." Then she collapsed and died within minutes. The doctor who examined her body found no trace of violence, no poison, no wound of any kind. The official verdict was death by natural causes, possibly a sudden heart failure brought on by extreme terror. Think carefully about this locked room mystery, detective. How could someone die in agony from apparent terror, in a room locked from the inside, with no visible cause of death? What could create such fear that it would literally kill a healthy young woman? Holmes's investigation begins with a crucial question. Miss Stoner, why do you now fear for your own life? What has changed to make you believe you're in immediate danger? Helen's answer reveals the final piece of the puzzle. 3 days ago, Dr. Roylott informed me that repairs were needed to my bedroom wall, and I would have to sleep in Julia's old room, the same room where she died. Last night was my first night in that cursed chamber, Helen continues, her voice dropping to a whisper. At exactly 3 in the morning, I was awakened by the same low whistling sound Julia had described, followed by the metallic clanging noise. I was too terrified to investigate, but I'm certain, absolutely certain, that tonight will be my last night alive unless you can help me. Holmes springs into immediate action. Miss Stoner, return to Stoke Moran and act as though nothing has changed. This evening signal us with a lamp when Dr. Roylott has retired to his room. Watson and I will investigate the manor tonight and discover the truth behind the Speckled Band before it can claim another victim. That evening, you accompany Holmes and Watson through the Surrey countryside to Stoke Moran Manor, a crumbling estate that looms against the stormy sky like something from a Gothic nightmare. The very architecture seems to whisper of secrets and violence, with broken windows staring down like empty eye sockets. Dr. Roylott himself proves to be a figure of pure menace when he confronts you at the estate gates. A massive man with a violent temper, a collection of exotic pets including a cheetah and baboon, and a reputation for brutality that has terrorized the local community. His very presence radiates the kind of evil that makes rational people cross to the other side of the street. So, you're the meddling detective who's been filling my stepdaughter's head with nonsense about murder. He snarls at Holmes with undisguised hostility. I warn you, stay away from my family affairs or you'll regret the day you ever heard the name Roylott. But Holmes meets his threats with icy composure. Dr. Roylott, I find that those who make the loudest threats usually have the most to hide. Your behavior only confirms my suspicions about your role in your stepdaughter's death. The confrontation crackles with tension as two formidable adversaries size each other up. When Helen signals that her stepfather has retired for the night, Holmes leads you through a detailed examination of the death chamber. What he discovers through careful observation will demonstrate why he's considered the world's greatest detective. Observe everything, Watson, Holmes instructs as he examines the room with his magnifying glass. Note that the bed is clamped to the floor and cannot be moved. See how the bell pull beside the bed is a dummy. It doesn't connect to any bell system. Most importantly, look at this ventilation shaft that connects directly to Dr. Roylott's room next door. The ventilation shaft proves to be the key to the entire mystery. It's large enough to allow passage for something considerably bigger than air, and it leads directly from Roylott's chamber to the exact spot above Julia's bed, where she died in agony. Holmes's examination reveals even more sinister details. Notice the saucer of milk on top of that safe, Watson. And observe these scratch marks on the chair beside Dr. Roylott's desk. What kind of creature requires both milk and a perch, yet leaves claw marks in solid wood? The answer comes at exactly 3 in the morning, when the low whistling sound begins again. Holmes immediately recognizes it for what it is, not a supernatural phenomenon, but the sound of someone calling a trained animal. The metallic clanging that follows is the sound of a safe being quickly closed and locked. The Speckled Band, Holmes whispers with grim realization. It's not a band of men or a piece of fabric, it's a snake. a deadly Indian swamp adder trained to crawl through the ventilation shaft, down the bell pull, and bite whoever is sleeping in that bed. The whistle calls it back, and Roylott rewards it with milk. The final confrontation unfolds with terrifying swiftness. Holmes strikes at the bell pull with his walking stick, driving the serpent back through the ventilation shaft into Roylott's room. Moments later, a horrific scream echoes through the manor, followed by an ominous silence that speaks of ultimate justice. When you enter Roylott's chamber, you find him seated in his chair, dead, with the Speckled Band, a deadly swamp adder, coiled around his forehead. The snake's venom has killed the man who had used it as a weapon of murder, turning his own evil scheme against him. Holmes surveys the scene with grim satisfaction. Dr. Roylott died by the same method he used to murder Julia Stoner. The snake, enraged by my attack, bit the first person it encountered when it returned to its master's room. Poetic justice, you might say. The case resolves with Helen Stoner's complete freedom from both immediate danger and financial dependence. With her stepfather's death, she inherits her full portion of her mother's estate and can now marry whomever she chooses without fear of deadly consequences. Holmes's final analysis reveals the full scope of Roylott's diabolic plan. He knew that a snake bite would be virtually undetectable by Victorian medical examiners, especially from an exotic species. The locked room made investigation impossible, and the trained serpent left no trace of human involvement. It was nearly the perfect murder weapon. But his plan had one fatal flaw, Holmes continues with satisfaction. He underestimated his victim's intelligence and courage. Julia's dying words about the Speckled Band provided the crucial clue, and Helen's determination to seek help prevented a second murder. Years later, Helen Stoner would marry her beloved officer and live a long, happy life, forever grateful to Holmes for saving her from her stepfather's murderous scheme. The Stoke Moran estate would be sold and demolished, erasing the physical reminder of one man's greed and cruelty. Holmes often reflected on this case as one of his most satisfying victories. Sometimes, the greatest evil disguises itself as family protection. Dr. Roylott used his position as guardian to become a predator, but ultimately, his own weapon delivered the justice that human law might never have achieved. The Speckled Band case demonstrates that the most fiendish crimes often involve the betrayal of the most sacred trusts, when those who should protect become those who destroy, and when love becomes a mask for murderous greed. So tell me, detective, did you deduce that the Speckled Band referred to a snake before Holmes revealed the truth? What does this terrifying case teach us about how financial incentives can corrupt even family relationships? And how do we recognize when those closest to us might pose the greatest danger? This chilling mystery reminds us that evil often wears the mask of respectability, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are those who have legal authority over their victims. Join me next time as we investigate The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb, a case where a young hydraulic engineer's horrifying night of captivity leads Holmes into a world of counterfeiting, violence, and mechanical horrors that will test every ounce of his deductive powers.